Hey everyone, welcome back to Band on Band. On this episode, I'm talking to the longest-serving BSM family member, Kevin Devine. Kevin's been with BSM since around about 2009 and recently celebrated the 10th anniversary of that first album that we put out together, Brother's Blood. We caught up before one of his shows in the UK and had a great chat about Pedro the Lion. Enjoy. You ready?
Yep.
Awesome. Kevin Devine, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's an honor to be on the Big Scary Monsters podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Band on Band. You have decided to pick Pedro the Lion and his album Phoenix to talk about.
Yep.
When was the first time that you listened to Pedro the Lion? What did you feel? What did you think?
Oh,
Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, I had a friend who's still a close friend of mine, Mike Iadarola, everybody calls Dola. Mm-hmm. And him and his then girlfriend, Jen Zoltowski.
That's a good second name.
Yep. I think they brought me in 1999 to the Knitting Factory, the old Knitting Factory, when it was in the Lower West Side of Manhattan on Leonard Street, to see Pedro the Lion on It's Hard to Find a Friend. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I'd heard him. I might have heard, You're up with the sunrise and down when the work's been done. Oh, whatever that song's called. I can't remember the name of it. Because I don't think the names of the songs are the lyrics on that record often. Someone to help me. It's a song about laziness, essentially. And like seeing somebody in your life who forms better habits and like being like, I wish I could do that. Yeah. And I remember thinking like, the songwriting was just so good, and I was big into like Elliott Smith and Cat Power and Pavement and Bill and Sebastian. That was like a big moment. And I heard this guy, and I was like, and Built to Spill and all that. And I heard him, and I was like, oh, this is like right up that alley. Yeah. And I went to see him play, and what I remember about that show was just the commitment. The songs were so good, but he was so committed, and I do remember thinking like I was raised Catholic. I'm not a practicing Christian or Catholic. It's been a long time since that's been an identification point for me. Culturally, you grow up in something like that, it kind of sticks around forever. But that is not what I think is like happening architecturally or anything. Yeah. But I do remember hearing him, and even then, when in retrospect he was still like fully identifying as an evangelical Christian, just hearing the struggle and the doubt and the gap between, and there's a song called The Secret of the Easy Yoke, it might have been, that was about like going to church but not relating to other people, but having his own spiritual experiences. I remember getting all of that at 19, like watching this dude, and also it was one of those things where I thought he's probably 3 years older than me. Yeah. But he just seemed like he was 50. Yeah. Like his I don't know, he seemed like he knew something.
He looks older as well.
Yeah, and he also sounded like, a lot of us had like this higher, his voice was so roomy from the beginning, and he's only grown, the roots of that have only grown wider. But that was the first time I heard him, and I became an instant super appreciator, and I went and saw David play a lot before he became like a person that like I kind of knew, and then became like something of a peer. For a long time he was a person that I was just like, and I still think he's like he's like the shit. And I thought he was like the shit for a long time before like we knew each other. And I still do. I think he's very, very upper nth percentile of people doing what we all do today.
Yeah, so that's back in 99, so that must have been, I guess he was doing solo stuff there? He
was playing with his band. It was a three-piece band. Okay. Yeah, Pedro was always presentationally a band, but I guess akin to like, I just never had this good sense to name my thing a project. I just played as me. Sure. But it's like, Cat Power is Sean Marshall, Bright Eyes is Connor Oberst, Pedro the Lion is David Bazan. I know that's not strictly true, because when those people go and do other things, it gets met differently. Yeah. But in my mind, if you put a gun to the average music fan's head and said, name another member of
Pedro the Lion,
they'd have a hard time.
Yeah.
Super hardcore Pedro fan, like T.W. Walsh back then, or this person then, but I also do know like the culture at large moves around differently about it than maybe someone who's super granularly. But in my mind, like he was the driving force of it. But Pedro was always a band back then. Yeah. Presentationally.
And then he sort of went on and did his solo stuff where it was just him in house shows.
And what I remember the first time I saw that was he was transitioning. It was pre the whole house show thing happening, and he played at a club called Maxwell's in Hoboken. And I remember that was a moment of awareness for me that was like, oh, people don't think of this the way I think of it. Because Maxwell's was like this. Yeah. And it was maybe half full. And the last time I'd seen Pedro the Lion, it was like at 1,000 capacity venue in New York, and it was sold out. Yeah. And I was like, but it's the same dude playing most of the same songs.
Just with a band and without a band.
And the name changed, but I also think people, I don't take it, I think I take it for granted that people are a lot more granularly invested in music like this. There's still people who like casually, they might have heard like a Pedro the Lion song on some, maybe they like Death Cab for Cutie and they saw Pedro open for them once and they had like one record and they didn't even know that David Bazan is the name of the guy. For sure, you know what I mean? People get into things at all different times, at all different depths and for all different reasons. But I remember seeing that start and then going to some of the house shows and he's a person I've seen a great deal. Yeah. It's really only fairly recent that it's in the last 5 years that I would feel like comfortable saying like, that's like a person that I would say is like a friend. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh hey! Didn't see you there. You caught us listening to Sincerely Overwhelmed, our newest single, available now on all streaming platforms.
And while we've got you here, let us talk about our debut album coming out March the 13th this year. Woo!
It's available to pre-order now from Big Scary Monsters. Basically, the sooner you get in, the more free stuff you're gonna get.
So what are you waiting for? Pre-order Lovecore, our debut album now. Go now.
Go. Shoot, get it, go get it. Get out of here, get out of here. Get out of here.
So you first saw Pedro in '99. My personal favourite album of his is the one that we released, Phoenix, which I just think's an incredible.
It's wonderful.
I think it's such a good structured album, and the stories behind all the songs are. I mean, I remember when I first listened to it, it wasn't as I expected a Pedro the Lion record to be, because I used to listen to Control and stuff like that. How do you feel about that album? Tell me some thoughts.
About Control or about Phoenix?
Let's go with Phoenix, then Control.
I think when I heard Yellow Bike, it just had this, I think it's a really hard thing to make. It's a hard thing to identify and drill into and develop your own sound, period. And he certainly has done that. Yeah. I think it's really interesting that the different faces, there's the kind of electro-friendly thing that headphones is, and some like records like as a Care, some of Bazan records have more of those elements. Then there's this kind of like folk singer sensibility that just pops up, or like rock guy. Yeah. But then there's the Pedro thing is something where I feel like it's dynamic, and it's certainly in the world of rock music, but it's also I don't know, chimey, shimmery, bright. There's something. It's heavy music, but it's like there's also a lightness to it. And I feel like when I heard that song, it was like, oh, this is like a classic Pedro the Lion song, but as written by that person now.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That is very hard to do and do well. To not be like a parody or a caricature of yourself, to acknowledge the sonic architecture you live within, but to also like grow up.
It definitely had like a sense of someone who was more comfortable in their own skin, more comfortable with their ideologies and their history almost.
And also just arrangement wise, like there was almost like some clever, like it's fun. Yeah. Some of the arrangement stuff in that song, which is not always maybe something you would associate. I think there's playful moments actually on that first record, and I think that kind of went away for a while. And then I think there's actually some of that in the arrangements on Curse Your Branches. There's some kind of like you could hear he was having a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool. You can be like heavy as fuck, content wise, but have it be like have it be fun.
Well, especially as he went through such a like internal, I mean, crisis might be the right word to say, like with his religious ideology, that it seems like I said earlier, like now he's come through that and is like quite comfortable in his own head. And
he's also like a supremely funny person.
Yeah.
So to me, like really smart, sharp, funny, like in conversation, capable of like being like really funny.
Yeah.
So not that the music, I don't write funny music either, but I can be, you know, but I think even in his shows, there's room where it's you breathe and there's like humor in the presentation.
Yeah.
So, but the record, that was my entry point to it. The first single, first song, I loved it. Quietest Friend, I think, is a really special song.
I like the dynamic shift between the first half of the record and the second half. I feel like when you get to Quietest Friend, it becomes more of a slower paced folk. I don't feel like he's a folk artist, you know what I mean?
It's more like he's a folk artist the way someone like Neil Young is a folk artist. It's kind of inverting those forms. It's playing with, I think there's a lot of space in the Pedro record.
Mm-hmm.
The new one, I don't think of it as folk music, but I think of it like the records like Zuma or On the Beach, these Neil Young records that are really roomy. It's a band, but and there's songs, but there's just a lot of space.
Yeah.
And I think that's very cool. But no, I thought of it as, when I heard the record and I listened to it, what I was going to say to you before we started was like just by nature of, I have a daughter, she's almost 4. I don't know, I just feel like I deep dive with music less frequently than I did.
Okay.
I listened to this record a handful of times when it came out, a few times in a focused way and sometimes like atmospherically.
Yeah.
And to me, it really struck me that it was a clear return to form, like the band kind of, but also clearly like he'd incorporated what had happened in the 14, 15 years since Achilles' heel. And like it's like, you know, a version, it's a Pedro the Lion record that him as he is now would make.
Yeah.
It does sound different than those Dave Bazan records do, though, which is also interesting to me. Because I feel like, I might be wrong about this, but I feel like I saw him do a Bazan band tour with this band that became Pedro the Lion.
It's an odd,
very incestuous.
Yeah, it's an odd. It's not an odd. It's just, I would say, it's just not a traditional trajectory for an artist to go that way. I feel like Pedro the Lion now has it can only be Pedro the Lion now because of what's happened in the past, like the fact that Pedro was late 90s, then he was on his own for a bit, going back and forth in his car. But no, I think it's perfect.
I think it's a wonderful record, and I think it's also a worthy addition to a seriously impressive canon, overall body of work. Like this is a person who's put his bar is his like the. There are very few people. This doesn't work for audio when I'm doing stuff with my hands. There are very few people who it's like. I never hear a Bazan song and don't like it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
there's stuff I like more than others. There's stuff I feel more connected to than others. There's stuff that as a music brain turns me on more arrangement-wise, chordally, as a lyric writer. But there's never a thing that I hear that I'm like, oh, that's not very good.
Yeah.
There's I could name the people I think that about on one hand.
Yeah.
And I recognize that's all super subjective and there's nothing more subjective than taste, but to my specific taste, what I'm looking for in music, he's just dead red in the
just
middle
knocks
of it.
out of the park.
Yeah. And to me, and he's also one of the very few people, I'm an probably Elliott Smith uber alles person, and for me, one of the things that's always that the music people know, that guy could play everything better than it's like, why bring in a session player?
Yeah.
He could just do it.
Yeah.
They might have brought in session players sometimes because they were like, well, it'll just be quicker if we don't have to have
We
like
need someone to just read it and just play it.
Yeah, but he could play Rachmaninoff flawlessly on piano and then sit down and play like every Beatles song, transpose between guitar and piano flawlessly, and was a cool drummer. David, in his way, is like that.
Yeah.
Now I can like fuck around and do that a little bit. I can. That's a goal. And I can like. I've had a couple of recordings where I played drums, and I can like. I can't play piano. I can hunt and peck, but I can't like play.
Yeah. When the red light comes on.
Yeah.
All over the place.
But there's. Oh, I mean, like I can like. I have recorded piano parts, but I can't like sit down and play him like. You know.
Yeah.
But he's somebody who can, beyond being to my mind, challenging thinker, lyricist, accomplished lyricist, cool and interesting singular arrangement mind, wonderful singer, expressive, dynamic, singular voice, also can like play everything on the records really well, and does it the way he does it, which might be the most important part of all. Like, to me, one of the things I relate most to him about is he just does it the right way. I'm not saying I do it the right way, I'm saying I'm trying.
Yeah.
And when I see someone like him, I see somebody else that's trying too.
Yeah.
And it's sustaining and affirming to see somebody who's like, get in the fucking car and drive around and play. Like, it's not about elevated stature or rock star. And doing this at all, there's some ego negotiation, because even if it's a stage that's this high, you're literally on a stage. So there's some amount of like right-sized and like sanity checking that needs to happen, even if it's playing 150 capacity rooms. Which I'm grateful to have a lot of mirrors in my life that help me not get too lost up my own ass about stuff. But I see him as a person who I look to. He's literally someone that I've called and been like, what do you do in this situation? And we've had conversations like that. And I think that's as important to me, because he could be all of those things, but be like an asshole.
Did it feel, what was that bridge between like being a fan and then having him as like a confidant, as a friend? Was that like an odd transition, or was that just, did it just feel natural, like it happened?
To me, it was not. No, I wouldn't want to. I actually would say in ways like we don't speak frequently, but when we speak deeply. I went through a lot. I've gone through a lot in the last couple of years, professional and personal, and at one of those kind of crucible moments, he was somebody. We had like a 4-hour phone conversation, just like moving around and a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
When I was out in Seattle, he's come to shows out there. I'll come see him in Brooklyn. When I was out in Seattle to do a radio thing for KXP, actually a tour with another BSM artist, Chris Farron, who I love, in 2017. David came and we went to KXP together, and then went out and spent a day together, just like bouncing around coffee shops and like literally walking around the park where the Space Needle is, just talking for 6-7 hours. So I consider him to be, I would not say we are like frequent, but there's a depth there, a real, and we did that split together, and we're like, he's become a person I would say is a friend. Yeah, he's a friend. But I would also say that that was a very gradual process, and I think that for me, I had to kind of get, when I first met this person, I was drunk. I was at one of his shows at the Bowery Ballroom. He was opening for Low as Pedro the Lion. I went up to him pointing at, he was selling his merch. I was wasted, 21 years old, talking about the songs on one of the records, and started talking to him about how one of the songs always reminded me of my deceased brother and my dad.
Heavy.
And started fucking crying. And my friend, who was in a band with me at the time, saw me and was like, came over and got me. The next year I go back to see him again, and I'd grown my hair really long, and I thought, he won't remember.
Yeah.
And he came up to me at the bar, and he was like behind me, this voice is like, oh man, you grew your hair out. And I was like, oh no. Like later realized, like, you were the guy, later doing more of this.
Yeah.
And also having softness in my heart for the people that come up and like are emotional about the way their music, your music connects to them. But that's literally my first interaction with Bazan was me being like crying about my dead brother at the murder. Whether he remembers that or not, I remember it for sure.
Yeah, you definitely did.
And then like I would go up to him, and I still am this way with people. I'll like introduce myself as like, hi, I'm Kevin Devine, and then people are like, I know.
Yeah.
Some people are not, of course, but some people are like, oh, dude, I know who you are. And I think in 2006, I gave him a record called Put Your Ghost to Rest at Maxwell's, and I was like, I've met you, but he was like, yeah, dude, I know you. I know who you are. But I never want to err on the side of that.
It's like the insecurities of feeling like, oh, you remember me. Yeah. I
would rather that than be like, you know me, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like that feels like fucking insane to me. Like if someone is ever like says hello to me in the street, I don't assume they know my music. I think like I must know their brother from high school or something. But so I would think it was between, then I would see him around and we would talk, and I would see him around and we would talk, and I think it was around 2011 or 12, maybe, I can't place it exactly, but through Me Without You, another BSM great.
Another great band.
I think David came out and saw a Me Without You, Kevin Devine show in Seattle, and we hung out after that, and it was kind of like, that was maybe, somewhere in there was when it was like transitioning from just like, a mutual respect and like, you know, got along nice, but we're like pretty acquaintance oriented to like, I think that was, we kind of like start to hang out a little bit more. He came out to the show and Bubblegum tour. It was like us and Now 2013. So I think that it would have been early 2010s. And then at that point it was like, I felt, it's just like people are just people. Yeah. And I still think all the things I think about him as an artist, but I also think he's like a really high quality person too. Yeah. An inspirational person who is an inspirational artist and a very good artist. And who also like you get to just like, these are just people. Yeah. I know that's like, but I do know if I ever, and I'm a little like, my brain's slightly tired and addled, so I hope I'm making sense. But I do know if like when I meet people and they're kind enough to be like moved about the music, or even if I get the sense that they're a little like, I don't know. This is a weird thing we do. People attach things to you, even if you, like, I never enter into a conversation with anyone thinking like I'm on some higher, I literally am thinking the opposite most of the time. And so that's what's a funny thing when like someone who might be nervous to meet you at the merch table might come up and like overcompensate and sort of act like aggressively with you. Cause I'm like, oh no, I don't think I'm cooler than you. I promise you, please don't be mean to me because I don't think I'm cooler than you. But similarly with an artist like David, before he became a friend, like to me there was like, I had to kind of get, this might be a story that'll make it make sense that has nothing to do with him. We made a record called Put Your Ghost to Rest with a producer called Rob Schnaff, and I came to Rob through, he made all the Elliott Smith records. That's why I wanted to work with him. Makes sense. He wanted to work with us. Mm-hmm. We make this record together. And the first time I go in to record for real, not the scratch tracks, we've been working together for 3 weeks, doing the drums, doing everything else, but when it's my turn to now do like the rest of everything, the first day I was like, I was 25 years old. I was like, I can't play guitar and sing in front of the guy that recorded 100 Elliott Smith songs. Like, and because it was like, he's recorded the person who I think is the best at this. He's not going to think I'm the best at it, so what am I? Yeah, absolutely. And what I kind of realized at some point, he was just like, he caught it. It was unspoken, but he must have felt the trepidation or the anxieties, maybe. And he was just kind of like, hey, I'm here to make your record. Do your thing. Everyone's just a person. Yeah. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to hear you play guitar and sing. I think similarly, at some point, you have to get right with the fact that, like, it's not like, right size doesn't just mean taking my ego from the clouds and bringing it down. It also means like pulling myself up from the ground sometimes too, absolutely. And standing in an appropriate place. And so at some point with David, it was like, I think all that stuff about him. He's also just like a person. Yeah. We're figuring shit out, and me too. Yeah. And he wouldn't be talking to me if he didn't want to be doing it. That's amazing. You know what I mean? Yeah, so absolutely. Like, then it's just like, oh yeah, right. He's just a person who I also like. I like a lot of people. I don't listen to their records at home.
Yeah.
David's one of the ones
Yeah.
I'll put his shit on at home. Yeah.
Yeah. So, final question, and then I'll leave you be. What is your favourite Pedro the Lion song? One word.
Oh, wow. That's hard because I think it moves around.
Currently, then.
The song I most often think of by Pedro the Lion recently is, I'm terrible with titles, but it's the one on Achilles' heel. Foregone Conclusions, it's called. You were too busy steering the conversation toward the Lord to hear the voice of the Spirit begging you to shut the fuck up. So good. But my favorite song of his, probably since I heard it, is Curse Your Branches.
Wonderful. That's a great place to end it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty special song. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
thanks for having me.
What a nice guy. Big thanks to Kevin for taking the time to chat to me there. We actually caught up about a week later at another show of his, and honestly, it's just great to hang out and talk about music with him. He's a very interesting character, got a lot to say, and just think we like the same music, which is always good. Anyway, Band on Band is obviously still hosted by me, Connor Laws, and edited by my good friend and lover of every song on Ruben's second album, Oscar Lydiard. Little foreshadowing there for you for something that might be coming later on in the year. As always, be kind to yourself, support your friends, share the podcast, rate us on the net, and just catch you soon for another one. Bye.